Greetings to you. So I'm here doing this live because, well, first of all, happy Monday to you. Happy Monday to you. Today is like one of those Mondays I've been feeling for the past like 24 hours. Oh, you guys, excuse me. I live on the block. Yeah. You hear the motorcycles? Yeah, that's the block right there. Yeah, that's the block. Yeah, my block is hot. My block is hot. So like today, it's been 25 years since Tupac died. And I felt, for some reason, I kept feeling eerie all weekend. Like I couldn't shake it. And it was like real small on Saturday. And then Sunday, I started feeling like really, really eerie or whatever. And then I couldn't shake it. Like it got higher and higher. And honestly, I thought it was just my random depression that kicks in. And it was. And then when I was doing my weekly schedule, I realized that today, this is what I realized yesterday, that today was 9/13. And 9/13, 25 years ago, Tupac died. But more importantly, is also my grandmother's birthday. Yeah, so September 13th is my grandmother's birthday. I don't know if I ever shared that. I don't know if I ever shared that publicly. I don't really talk about my grandmother enough or a lot, really, to be honest with you. But my grandmother raised me, and Tupac died on the same day as my grandmother's birthday. And it was a crazy time. So first of all, I'm showing my age because, I mean, listen, I was a teenager when Tupac died 25 years ago, right? But that's totally fine. Because some of you who are watching this or who will watch this, you know that, you know, what it was like, right? And so I was thinking about this because if you were too young, most of your Tupac fandom majority came when he was gone, right? It's kind of like, as an 80s baby, Marvin Gaye. Like Marvin Gaye, I don't even know if I was thought about when Marvin Gaye died, or maybe I was 1 or 2 or something like that. But as I was growing up, every time Marvin Gaye was being played, it was always an adult who would tell me, yo, he's dead. Like Marvin Gaye's dead. Marvin Gaye's dead. That's what they'll tell you. Like Marvin Gaye's dead. So you kind of was like, oh man, you enjoying this guy's music or whatever. And someone's telling you, you know, he's gone. So that's what it's like for people like my niece. Like my niece is 19. So all my niece's life, Tupac has been gone. So someone has always had to tell her that Tupac is gone. So she don't know what it's like for Tupac to be alive while Tupac alive, to have any kind of like live memory of him, like being alive, right? At 19 years old. I got a little homie that's 20 years old. Me and him was riding around the other day. He just heard for the first time Me Against the World. Like I played it for him. And he had thought about it. He had never heard Tupac's music. Like most young people, he just made the assumption. He was just like, yeah, you know, I never, you know, I don't know if I really rock with dude. But he just said that because he's young. But then he listened to it. He was like, oh man, this dude go pretty hard. And so for me, usually when Tupac's day come or my grandmother's day come, it just kind of comes. It comes and it goes. Like it comes and it goes, right? Like sometimes it goes. Then every once in a while I kind of pause. And a lot of times I don't pause on Tupac's birthday Tupac's the day that he died, like every year. Just like I don't pause every year for my grandmother's birthday. Like it's just one of those things. Sometimes it be 4, 5, 6 years past, and sometimes it's like, oh, today's my grandma's birthday, and I'm just like, oh, happy birthday, grandma. You know what I'm saying? I keep it moving. And then sometimes with Tupac, it's like every year, you know, like somebody tell you Tupac's birthday, and you're just like, oh. But for the first time in my life, for the very, very first time in my life, I got hit with both of them at the same time. It was an interesting thing. Like I got hit with the death of Pac and my grandmother's birthday at the same time. Like the feeling hit me at the same time. And that's never happened to me ever in life. Not even the day Pac died. That's never happened to me today. And so I wanted to take time to kind of like talk about how these things, what they meant. And here's the thing, right? I was all day long as I was working, I wanted to write about it. Like I wanted to take time. I wanted to write about it. I wanted to talk about, you know what I mean, what Tupac's death meant with my grandma, but I couldn't like articulate it, right? So I was like, well, how do I start? You know, so let me just start from the beginning. The first time I got up on, let me give you two different paths. So the first time I got up on Pac, it was my boy Adonis. Adonis Bryant was one of my closest best friends when I was growing up as a kid. We met at middle school. He was the biggest Tupac fan ever. He can recite. I mean, he can. You guys, excuse me. I'm just doing this message real quick, but he can do Tupac's lyrics better than Tupac. I kid you not. Like Adonis could rhyme Tupac's lyrics better than Pac, and he thought Tupac way before Tupac became the legend that he is. He thought Tupac was the greatest rapper alive, even then. He did. And Adonis lived by everything Pac did. I mean, he just lived by everything Tupac did. It didn't matter. Whatever Pac said, it went. So at the time, I was a kid. I was listening to like Spice One, DJ Quick, and all of that. You know, and Tupac was cool. But, you know, my boy, we all had like our favorites. So it was kind of like I didn't want Tupac to be my favorite because he was Adonis' favorite. So that was my first memory. One of my earliest memories of my grandmother was me trying to figure out what my grandmother's age was. And I remember being like, Grandma, you 99? And she was like, no, boy, ain't no 99. I'll be dead. Then one year I was like, Grandma, you 1,000? And she was like, boy, ain't no 1,000. And it's so crazy because it's like these were numbers I was learning in school. So you know how in school you learn like 1 to 10. I was so happy to know 100. So I was like, Grandma, you 100? I ain't no 100. But my mother was telling my grandmother like he's just learning new numbers. He's learning new numbers. That's my first memory of my grandmother that I can remember was blurting out an age, and it was like on her birthday. And then with Pac, it was to my man Adonis. Now, as time went on, Pac became such a megastar. You legit like had no choice but to rock with him, right? And growing up in Detroit, it wasn't really that much of a bias. It wasn't like an East Coast, West Coast bias. And I was a young kid. I was barely able to know my geography like that. So you telling me I was Midwest, I didn't know I was going by the basketball team. I thought it was East Coast. You know what I mean? I'll take ownership of that. And a lot of my young friends, we did too. But really, honestly, we was Midwesterns. We didn't really have a bias. You had people who like him or who like Big. I like him and Big. Like, honestly, I get just as emotional when I hear Biggie sometimes as I hear Pac. But we on Pac, so I'm going to stay on that. His effect, the day he passed, when it was my grandma's birthday, I remember that's the first time I seen grown adults cry over somebody that they had never met. That was the first time in my life I had seen that. And I tell people, like, there's a paid in full generation. Like, my older brother was 13 years older than me, and he was definitely the paid in full generation. You know, Adidas track suits, all black outfits, you know what I mean? Kind of like when you see them BMF trailer, the show that's coming out, like my brother and them dressed like that. And so Amp was, all the homies outside was like busting shots in the air. Blocka, 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 blocka. Now, moments right before that, I had saw it on the news because this was before social media, so I saw it on the news and I thought it was, I knew they wasn't lying, but I wanted them to lie. But I knew they wasn't lying because I was like, why would the news be talking about Tupac? Because back then, you know what I mean, they only cover rappers when they did something wrong. And Tupac was on the machine for a few days before his mother pulled the plug. And I remember it was Friday the 13th. And my grandmother didn't want to go out that day. And she didn't. So we was just in the house, and I came in my mother's room, and I said, "Mom, Pac died." And my mom was like, her mouth just dropped. And when her mouth dropped, she was just like, she loved Pac because she felt like she loved the way he can articulate. Like, she loved him in interviews, and she loved how he can express himself and things of that nature. Like, that's what she loved about him, because she felt like she hate when, as she used to say, my mother used to say, rappers talk with a bunch of marbles in their mouth. But Tupac talked very clear. He was eloquent, all that stuff. There was other rappers who did too, but nobody was a force like Pac, Just like there were other boxers who can communicate, but nobody was like Ali, right? So kind of give you that. And, when he died, you just heard gunshots outside. Then all the homies and there were, men and women outside just crying. They were all just outside just crying. And then as far as the city and the environment that I'm from, I went to school the next day. Kids ain't want to do nothing. Some kid threw a cheer at a teacher. He was just mad. He felt like nobody could feel Pac like he could. And so, that was our, in that generation, our Jimi Hendrix. Our hero had passed away, right? Our rebel without a cause. And, of course you had the theories if he alive, and, people, had all these theories and all this other stuff. And the internet at that time, wasn't as big as it is now, but definitely had the online theories, I remember. But for me, I knew he was, he was gone. And my grandmother, I remember it was probably the last time my grandmother really celebrated her birthday. My grandmother, after that, she didn't really want to celebrate her birthday no more. All you had to do was just tell her happy birthday, and that was it. She didn't really want to go out. She didn't really want to go. She didn't want to make no big fuss. She was like, I'm good. Just happy birthday. I'm glad to see another life. I'm good. Go to the store, get her some cigarettes. She was fine. Yeah, get her some cigarettes, right? And she stopped celebrating her birthday. And so, for me at that time, I got Tupac going. Oh, what up, Luther? I got Tupac going. And my grandmother stopped celebrating her birthday. It was like a crossroads. And I remember running into the homie Adonis, and who I knew was a Tupac fan from day one. And of course, by this time, when Tupac died, everybody claimed they were a Tupac fan from day one. But Adonis really was a Tupac fan from day one. Like, hands down, no question, Tupac to the day he died. I ran into him, and we hadn't saw each other in some months or whatever, and he just didn't look the same. At this time, we were no longer in school, so I wasn't seeing him on a day-to-day. And you can just tell he had this kind of like this darkness over him. Like, I saw him at this party, and I was like, yo, what's up, homie? You know what I'm saying? It's one of my closest friends, even though we hadn't saw each other and we wasn't seeing each other every single day or whatever. But he was still my brother, and he just gave me this dap. He was just like, yo, what up? And I said, man, you heard about your man? He was just like, he didn't really want to talk about it. He was just like, yeah, whatever. I was like, all right. I mean, I was dealing with it myself, right? Like, I was in kind of a disbelief. And as time went on, I started hearing things about my brother Adonis, and some of his activities that he was getting involved in. I started hearing things, right? And I don't want to say anything out loud because I was hearing things. So I don't want to put anything in the universe that's not true. But we were on different roads. As pop music began to continue to play, you started to really hear what Pac was saying and really feel a certain type of way, because at that time we didn't hear a rapper talk about his death. We hadn't. And now somebody who was talking about his death was dead. And that was eerie. And it's still eerie when I think about it. The fact I was listening to it last week, like I told you, with my little homie, and we were playing Me Against the World, which is Tupac's best album. And it's even his favorite album, which he's on record for saying Me Against the World is his favorite album. And it's a shame that he was locked up and he technically was in no videos of Me Against the World because he was locked up. So if you ever watch any videos for Me Against the World, like Temptation, So Many Tears, other rappers that are his homeboys are in it. Like I think E40's in So Many Tears. Temptation got a cameo of everyone like Coolio, Ice-T, Jada Pickett's in the video, stuff like that. But he was alive. But as I'm listening to Me Against the World, every other reference is about a passing. Every other reference about him, he about to die. Every other reference. And listening to it now as a grown man, I'm like, yo, that's like homie was dealing with a lot. He was dealing with a lot. He was telling us his emotion. And unlike in today's era, and it made me, in a lot of ways, it reminded me of why I feel like an artist like Drake hasn't reached a certain a certain level yet. It's not that I got nothing against. I think Drake is a dope rapper. Like mechanically, the way he spit his bars, I think he snaps. I think he's good. But I think my issue with him, like the way it is with a lot of today's era rappers, like they're too cool. Like nothing affects them. Like they're never hurt. They're never withdrawn. They always know the answer. Everything always works out in their song. They always get the girl. It's never just a heartbreak. It's a heartbreak, but it's F that bitch. You know what I'm saying? Well, Pac would leave it at that. If he was hurt, the song ended, he was hurt. And there was something about that vulnerability that I didn't even recognize back then as a kid that I guess I admired or identified with, but I really admire as a grown man. Now that I'm past the age of 25, I think about it. Not too many people know this, but Pac only had a 5-year stretch. His first album dropped when he was 20. He died when he was 25. The pressure to be put on someone from 20 to 25 to lead us in an environment or in a time where it wasn't that many leaders that we felt like we could look to, that's a lot to put on one individual. It's a lot. Like Biggie died at 24. Like these dudes were babies. They were young. Your brain don't even start really understanding certain things until you about in your 30s. You know what I'm saying? Like it just doesn't. And we was asking, I look back on some interviews that Pac was in, and people were asking him like world peace questions of a 21-year-old, of a 22-year-old, in the midst of him getting in trouble, having his issues and all of that, but wanting him to figure out how to save people. You're asking like a 21-year-old. You're asking like a 22-year-old. And now that I worked in media for a certain amount of years, some of those interviewers knew what they were doing. And they'll get him riled up and let him go on these tangents and these rants. And they were just like, I can see it now. I couldn't see it back then. Because back then it was just like, oh, go Pac, go. I see it now and I'm like, because as an interviewer or as a journalist, you kind of know the tempo. You kind of know what poke somebody. You kind of know that. You might stay calm, but they're a liar. They tell you like, oh, I didn't know he was going to be like, you knew. If you've been reading, it's the same thing that we talk about now. Like if we see an artist or a celebrity and they're on front page every day and they're going through like a divorce, for example, you know good and well when you have them in front of you and your first thing you want to ask them about their divorce, you know there's a chance they might spaz on you. You know that. You're trained that. That's what you're told to do as a journalist, especially back then because you had more quote unquote journalists really doing their job. It wasn't like on social media where anybody who has a page can get on a live and talk to you. So these professional journalists knew what they were talking when they were talking to this very young man. Some of them were asking questions because they was astonished by the fact that he was so young. He had so much knowledge. Others were asking because they just wanted to get a headline, a piece from him. And that's what it was. I think about the wisdom that my grandmother had, and my grandmother to this day had a hearing, the way she could listen to someone was a craft. It was a gift. Like I aspire to be like that, where I can develop a listening ear. She could listen to anybody. So I mean, like 3 a.m, it might be an individual who just finished putting in work, gun still smoking, and they knock on the door. Miss Hodges, can I just talk to you? Miss Hodges, I need to talk to you. And my grandmother would have them in the kitchen. She'll make them some tea and she'll just listen. And as a kid, I would be by the steps and I would listen. And if my grandmother heard me, she'd be like, go back upstairs, boy. And I'd be like, but if I could, I would hear some of the most gangster street dudes from my block in tears talking to this older woman, telling her telling her what they just did. I mean, they be drenched what they just did. I don't know what I'm going to do, Miss Hodges. I had to, boom, gun still smoking. Or what they sold or whatever they just saw, or drug addicts. I just fell off the wagon again, coming talking to her. I mean, my godmother who lived next door, rest in peace, Mama Jones, she was known as, her last name was Jones, right? She was known as the hawk of the neighborhood, the person that if you wanted something to get out, you would tell Miss Jones. But if you wanted something to stay in, you would tell Miss Hodges. And they were best friends. It's just one of those things. And my grandmother could just listen. I mean, really listen, not just be in front of you. Like, she could listen and somehow find a piece to, I don't care if you was 5 years old and you got your heart broken. She'd be like, yeah, I get it. And she could say something to you where she can remember when she was 6 years old when she got her heart broken. My mother, God bless her soul, wasn't necessarily like that. My mother would be like, boy, you be over it. She was trying to raise a gangster. So she was like, boy, you be over it. You be fine. You be fine. Everything will be fine. You be fine. You know, you got a whole lot of life ahead of you. And I understand that. But there was something about the gift that my grandmother possessed. And her birthday every year, when she decided she no longer wanted to celebrate it, I'm just now understanding what it was. She didn't want the days to change. She really wanted to just observe everything and just observe and just understand everything and look at people. Like, she got joy out of just watching me play with my toys in the living room. She got joy out of that, just watching me play. She got joy out of just watching me play the video game. When I got older, she got joy out of just watching me work out with my first little curl bar. She got joy out of watching me play basketball. She got joy out of just watching. That was just her thing. I try to, emulate that or, practice that listening thing that she does. I try. I don't have the patience that she has, because sometimes if some of my friends, if they say something, I know I'm like, yo, what are you doing? Like, I just can't help it sometimes, right? But I'm getting there. I'm getting better. When my grandmother was alive, she never got a chance to see me evolve. I definitely tested her and my mother's. I tested them. I tested everybody. I didn't care about, my life. Because as I got older, at that time, anybody who I looked toward, they died. Because once Biggie died, within the culture, it was like, all right, well, now what? You know what I mean? Like, Hov wasn't who he is now. Now what? It was a gap, right? So I felt that emptiness that a lot of people felt when Pac's presence was there, because it's kind of like the way it is, in a sense, almost similar to Nipsey Hussle. When Nipsey died, it took a minute for us to really, really understand that Nipsey was gone, because his songs were still like being played, still new. And it take a minute for you to realize, like, oh man, we not, when you hear that song again for the 100th times, like Pop Smoke, when you hear it again for the 1,000th time, then you realize this person's not going to make any more songs. Now, with Tupac, he had about 40 songs. But after a while, if you were a fan, or if even you were someone who was just listening, you could tell that the songs wasn't the same quality when he was alive. God bless his mother, who's in heaven. She did what she could, but the songs was not the same. It just wasn't the same. You didn't try to get the latest Tupac no more, even if it was unreleased. It just wasn't the same. There's a reason why a lot of artists have unreleased music, because they don't want nobody to hear that shit. There's a reason for that. A lot of them want the music to die when they die. There's a reason why they make 20 songs and they select 12. There's a reason for that. And with Tupac, as time went on, you started to realize he wasn't coming back. You had all these 7-day theories, and he's in Cuba with his godmother, Asante Shakur, and, he's going to come back. But the realness of it was he was gone and he wasn't coming back. And at that time, and anybody who's known me for a very long time, like my Yahoo email was my very first email ever, right? Remember Yahoo, and remember Hotmail? And you're right, you remember Hotmail, right? And my first email was jhall25. It was JAHAL 25. And the reason why is because I didn't think I would live to be 25. I didn't think I would live to be 25. You want to know what put a pin in that to make me really believe I wasn't going to live to be 25? Was when I lost my homeboy Adonis when we were 18. When I lost Adonis when we were 18, he was murdered. That shook my core. And and I've lost homies after that. But Adonis, it always come back to Adonis because I lost him 2 years later, and it shook my core. And when Adonis died, I was like, I'm not going to let it be 25. So when the email first came out, I was like, all right, 25, you know? Now that I certainly have lived past 25, and some of you listening have lived past 25. When you look back on your age, I know I do, and I take ownership. I'm like, man, I was stupid, or how did I survive that? Woo. But with growth, I become the person I am now, which I'm sure you have. And I think about the fact that my grandmother had a whole life before me. And I think about that now because, like, for example, my best friend Michelle is watching this. Michelle is a mother. I've literally known Michelle since before she had children. So I truly understand when the OGs and the adults used to say, I knew your mother before you were thought of. That is real. That is real. So her children are only going to know her as the mother, Michelle. I'm going to know her as Michelle, and then Michelle, the mother. So my grandmother had a whole life. So she had to live a whole life to, even though I do feel her listening was a gift, she still had to live to become the grandmother that I knew. But she got that chance. The sadness of Tupac and the sadness of Big is they accomplished so much at such an age that they were, whether you agree with them or not. Whether you was a New Yorker, like my homeboy who's on right now, Queens Get the Money. What's up, Carlito? If you were someone in the East Coast and you was like FM, all right, cool, that's fine, right? But the point is that there are a lot of artists I didn't like in the beginning. I didn't like Hove in the beginning. But to see where Hove is, what Jay-Z is doing now versus what he was doing at 25, he got an opportunity to live to that age. We don't often get a chance to live to that age to see our growth. We judged even now the little babies and the babies and all of that, and we downed on them and everything like that, but we're watching them grow in real time. If you think about it, Pac was on camera so much, that was social media, because we never saw a rapper. So every flaw, everything that he had when he was giving these interviews, he was doing interviews, music and movies. He was everywhere. We were watching his growth in real time. Picture a 50-year-old Pac with wisdom. A 49-year-old Biggie seeing his son. And on the side note, you want to feel old? Go to Biggie's son Instagram page and see him with a full-fledged beard. That's feeling old. But I think about my brother Adonis, and every time I go home, I still visit his grave. Now, here's a coincidence that I can give you. Adonis is buried in the same cemetery as my grandmother. No lie. And my grandfather, who passed away before I was born, Robert L. Hodges, and my great-grandmother. Adonis is buried in the same cemetery. So whenever I go home back to Detroit, I stop and I see my grandfather, my great-grandmother, both whom I've never met. But I pay my respects, and I make a circle, and I see Adonis, and then I ended with seeing my grandmother. When I see Adonis for years, my brother did not have a tombstone. And then one time, he finally got a tombstone, and they put his picture on it. And it's the picture that I remember him as. Backwards cap, looking like he's related to the DeBarge family, with the smile that I admire so much. And there's one voice that goes through my head whenever I look at his tombstone, and that's, I know if he see me, he'll probably be like, damn, nigga, you got old. Like, I know that's probably what he'll say, right? And when he passed, he had a daughter that was 2 weeks. And I think to myself, like, man, his daughter will have no memory, you know? And I don't know who visits his grave or not. I'm not in contact with his family. He had siblings. He had people who loved him way deeper than me. He did. But he never got a chance to live out his mistakes. He never got a chance to grow. And whenever I hear Tupac now, I think about that. He never got a chance to grow. Now, some people like to say that means you meant to be here for a short period of time. That's God's plan. I don't have an answer to that. I won't say it's God's plan or it's not. I truly don't have an answer to that. I really don't. What I can tell you is, grown as an adult and looking back on it and hearing Pac and past him in age, all I can see and hear now is the joy, his laughter, his mistakes, his flaws. But I also see a damn shame. A damn shame. Because how much we could have benefited from him getting older. And we were younger. People of my block or my experience and where I was from glamorized that. Like, you wanted to go out like that. But that ain't how to go out. It's not. And so I appreciate your time and hearing this, but I wanted to say about these three individuals. To those who know that my grandmother is the most important person in my life. Like, she's the architect of who I am right now. I never loved anyone like her, and she left. It changed me in ways that I'm still learning, in ways that I'm still understanding. The start of me wanting a new life. And to those who know me, it's how I went and I ended up leaving Detroit and going to DC and rolling the Howard and everything was from her death, right? Tupac changed me in ways of letting me know that my voice is important. That my voice can be a rap voice, it can be vocal, it can have pain, I can make a mistake, I can mispronounce a word, I can feel how I want to feel, then I can go back and I can apologize, like Pac had said something bad about Quincy Jones and then later on had to apologize because guess what? He was dating Quincy Jones' daughter. And Adonis, who was my first friend that I lost in the streets, unfortunately not the last, but my first friend, I think about the tragedy of the fact of not being able to run into him again. I'd rather Adonis be alive somewhere now and he just be another friend that I lost touch with and find him on Instagram years later than know exactly where I can see him every single year when I go home. I'd rather know exactly where he is. I'd rather not know where he is and imagine him living good. Hell, maybe even losing some of that pretty ass hair he had. Than know exactly where he is. Because he has something to offer the world. And the only time you hear about Adonis, it should not only have come from me. And sometimes I struggle if I should be the person to talk about his legacy as much. Because he got family, he got people who love him and things of that nature. But I can only tell my part and what he done for me, because Adonis was the first person I met in my life who cheered me being different when I told the group I didn't want to do something. Because he was the one that everybody wanted to follow. And if I said I didn't want to do something and people were teasing me, I was getting prepared to fight. He was the one I was like, nah, man, if he don't want to do it, he don't want to do it. Everybody would just silence. That's just who he was. He challenged every teacher. He challenged every thought. If we had the resources that we have now, they would probably put him in some gifted school. But back then, you know what they did with him? They kept putting him in the corner. They kept kicking him out of class. Yo, I don't know if Tupac was a prophet. Like, I don't. I do know that the music that he created is still relevant today. I do know that the issues that he talked about is the same issues we face in Black life today. I do know that he talked about things back then that we didn't necessarily have the language for when it comes to our mental health and how we feel about life today and taking time out and the stress of everyday life. I do know he talked about that back then. I don't know if Adonis would have been president of the United States or he would have ended up being a common thug. I have no idea. I just know that my brother didn't get the opportunity. And I don't know if my grandmother would have been okay with me leaving Detroit. And I don't know if I ever would have left Detroit if she would have stayed alive. I just know I did. And I just know that everywhere I walk now, I walk knowing that she's above me or next to me. And I try to think about what would she do, because she remains that figure in my life to keep me from jumping that edge. And so today for her birthday, I want to share that with you, because today is Alberta Hodges' birthday. And I just wanted to say out loud, verbally for the first time in my life, happy birthday, Alberta Hodges. Rest in peace, Tupac. And I'll always love you, Adonis M. Bryant. Thank you for your time.